You don't just change your habits, you change your identity. Let that sink in for a moment. Because here's the truth. The real reason habits don't last is not because you're lazy. It's not because you lack discipline. And it's definitely not because you just can't stay consistent. It's because deep down, your actions and your identity are not aligned. Now here's the key idea. You always act in ways that match who you believe you are, not who you want to be, not who you say you are, but who you actually believe you are deep down. So, if you see yourself as someone who struggles with procrastination, even if you try to act differently, your brain will slowly pull you back to that familiar identity. Because your mind is always trying to stay consistent with your self-image. Let me explain this in a simple way. Imagine two people trying to build the same habit, like waking up early. The first person says, "I'm trying to wake up early." The second person says, "I am someone who wakes up early." Now, both might wake up early once or twice, maybe even for a week. But when things get hard, when the alarm rings and they feel tired, their decisions start to split. The first person thinks, "Do I feel like waking up early today?" The second person thinks, "That's just what I do. I'm someone who wakes up early." Same situation, different identity, different outcome. Now here's what's happening psychologically. There's something called the self-perception theory. It basically means your brain observes your actions and then decides who you are based on those actions. So every time you follow through on a habit, your brain quietly updates your identity. I guess I'm becoming the kind of person who does this. But the reverse is also true. Every time you break a habit, your brain updates the opposite way. I guess this isn't really who I am. So what we're really doing here is not just building habits. We are carefully shaping identity through small, repeated actions. And once identity shifts, habits stop feeling like effort. They start feeling natural. Now let's make this real. Think about someone who struggles with consistency in studying or working. Maybe they say, "I always procrastinate. That's just who I am." So every time they sit down to work, they already feel like they are fighting against themselves. It feels heavy. It feels forced. Even if they manage to study for an hour, it feels like a battle. And because it feels like a battle, they eventually quit. Now compare that with someone who thinks differently. They don't say, "I'm trying to be productive." They say, "I'm someone who starts early and follows through, even when I don't feel like it." At first, the difference seems small, just wording. But over time, it changes everything. Because now, when they sit down to work and feel resistance, they don't interpret it as, "This is hard, maybe I should stop." They interpret it as, "This is just part of what I do." Now let's pause here, because this is where most people misunderstand identity change. They think it means repeating affirmations in the mirror or pretending to be someone else. But that's not how identity actually changes. Identity changes through proof. Small proof, repeated consistently. Let me show you what that looks like. Step 1 is simple. You decide who you want to become in very practical terms. Not vague goals like, "I want to be successful," but real identity statements like, "I am someone who finishes what I start." "I am someone who doesn't avoid difficult tasks." "I am someone who shows up daily, even when I don't feel like it." Now notice something important here. These are not goals. They are identities. And the difference is powerful. A goal is something you achieve and then move on from. An identity is something you become and live from. Now here's the second step. You start collecting small pieces of evidence that support that identity. Not big, dramatic changes. Small actions. Almost so small they feel insignificant. If your identity is, "I am someone who doesn't procrastinate," then your first proof might not be finishing everything perfectly. It might just be sitting down and starting for 5 minutes. That's it. Because the brain is not asking for perfection. It is asking for consistency. Every time you do even a small version of the identity, your brain logs it. Interesting. This person actually follows through sometimes. And over time, those small proofs start stacking up. Now here's something important to understand. Your identity is not built in a day. It is built on repeated moments of decision. So let's say you plan to study and you don't feel like it. In that moment, you have a choice. You can act from your old identity. I don't feel like it, so I won't do it. Or you can act from your new identity. I don't feel like it, but I'm still the kind of person who starts. That moment might feel small, but it is actually a vote for who you are becoming. Now imagine doing that again and again. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently. Over time, the identity shifts. And once identity shifts, behavior stops being a struggle. It becomes the default. Let me give you a real-life example. Think of a student preparing for exams. At first, they struggle with procrastination. They delay the revision. They get distracted easily. They feel guilty at night but repeat the cycle the next day. Now they hear about discipline and try to force themselves. They make strict schedules. They try motivational tricks. They might improve for a few days, but eventually they fall back because their identity is still unchanged. I'm someone who crams at the last minute. Now, let's say they shift one thing. Instead of trying to become a perfect student, they decide, I am someone who studies for 20 minutes every day, no matter what. That's it. So even on bad days, they open their book for 20 minutes. Sometimes they do more. Sometimes just those 20 minutes. But the identity starts forming. I'm the kind of person who studies daily. After a few weeks, something changes. Studying no longer feels like a negotiation. It feels like part of who they are. Now here's the key transition you need to understand. You don't wait to feel like your identity first. You act your way into it. Don't think your way into it. Act first. Identity follows. So let's bring this all together into something practical you can use immediately. From today, stop asking, what do I need to do? Start asking, who do I want to become? Then choose one small behavior that proves it. Just one, not 10, not a full transformation plan. One action that is small enough to do even on your worst day. Then repeat it. Not because it's exciting, but because it is shaping your identity. And when resistance shows up, and it will, you don't argue with it. You simply remind yourself, this is what I do. This is who I am becoming. Now I want you to understand something very clearly. This is not about becoming a different person overnight. This is about slowly closing the gap between your actions and your identity. Because the bigger the gap is, the more internal conflict you feel. But the smaller that gap becomes, the more natural everything feels. And eventually, you reach a point where discipline is no longer something you use, it is something you are. So, as you move forward from this chapter, don't look for motivation. Don't wait for a perfect moment. Start building identity through action. Because once your identity changes, your habits don't need to be forced anymore. They just happen.